Welcome WrestlingFix.com. Tim Ash here with none other than Arn Anderson. Arn, how you doing today?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
This is Comic-Con 2012 San Diego. I want to get your thoughts on what you see here, because this is your first time, is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, it's a madhouse, but I love madhouses, you know. I feel a little old seeing all these kids coming through here. You even make me feel old, but I tell you what, a lot of people are having a great time. My 15-year-old's wandering around out here. He's got to be having a blast. I mean, it's a spectacle. It's got to be a huge success on a global scale.
Well, I mean, it's kind of cool because you can pull in television series, you can pull in movies, and then pull in wrestling all in the same time. So it's really geeks, freaks, and wrestling fans all over the place here.
Which is my kind of crowd, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, it is. There's a little bit of everything out there, mainstream. It's amazing. You know, I find myself being retired since '97, still being relevant. That's a cool thing. I see dads bringing their sons and introducing them, and even daughters.
Right.
So, it's when you can have a new generation form without ever being on TV and people know who you are, it's very flattering, it really is.
Well, I mean, the fans were in droves out here to see you guys today. They saw you, they saw Bryan, they saw Alicia Fox. I mean, it does have to be some type of sense of like, man, this does matter because they are here and they're seeing you and they're seeing Daniel. But that brings back the memories of you being back in the wrestling days and being in the territories that you were in and being over like you were back in the day, right?
Well, that's very kind to say. I think we're over. You know, you look. The funny thing is, I'm looking down the table. I see Bryan, who could have wrestled in our era and been very successful because performance number one. That's what that guy's all about. Right. Then you got Alicia Fox sitting there in a Ninja Turtle outfit. Not a stagger step as far as popularity for Alicia. Then you got the old timer who came from a different era, but still performance was what we were selling at the time. And to have those three people sitting at a table looks a little odd, but it all gelled well together, and that's the beautiful thing about WWE. There's a little of this, a little of that, and a little of that.
Right, just like a Neapolitan ice cream bar.
Baskin Robbins, 16 flavors, absolutely.
Now, it was kind of funny you brought up Bryan being able to, wrestle in your era of time period. Yesterday they had a question to the panel, which had Sheamus and CM Punk and Zack Ryder on there, and the question was, how do you think the new generation versus the old generation is? And Punk took the mic and said, hey, look, my locker room could kick anybody else's locker room's butt. What do you think about that from your time period to now?
Well, if he didn't feel that way and he wasn't taking that kind of leadership role, I wouldn't respect the guy like I do. He's really stepped up last couple of years. I beg to differ. What we had probably in the last half of the 80s and the 90s, you had some massive egos that sometimes became troublesome. But the bottom line was everybody in that locker room could perform at an optimum level. When you got Tim Horner or Brad Armstrong or somebody jerking the curtain, and going out and tearing the building down for 20 minutes, that's who we were. And it didn't get worse after that. It got better. Today's locker room, the kids are well-behaved. They're gentlemen, great athletes. They're on time. They're great, they're easily coached. Let me just put it that way. We don't have any of those problems with any of these kids. But the only negative to what Punk said is we don't have that locker room full of veterans. It used to be a locker room full of veterans and two rookies. Now it's two veterans and a locker room full of rookies. Right. And it's a tough sell, but we're going to prevail because our audience doesn't want our product dead. So if they'll just be patient with us, we'll get these kids schooled, and maybe Punk will change his mind.
Now, you brought up that you had more veterans back then and less rookies, and now more rookies and veterans. In your time period, it was a lot harder to be a professional like what in this industry than it is now. Do you think it's a little bit easier on them now?
Well, the easier thing, and I want to be completely fair about this, is there was 20 places to go learn. And that's an advantage, period. If you had aptitude, you had the right attitude, you had a lot of places to go before you ever made cable television. These kids are brought in, and we have to solicit a lot of them. We don't have guys knocking down the door at the level we should, or I wish we had, but we have to get them ready, get them out on TV in just say 2 years' time, which is not much. Right. 2 years in my era meant you had already had probably 300 matches a year. You were 600 matches under your belt if you had 2 years experience. Fraction of that for these kids. So it's a disadvantage to them that they don't have places to go learn. Once you chunk them out on TV, our audience is very unforgiving, as we know. They base an opinion and they'll stick by it unless you do something very quickly to change it. So, it's not fair in a lot of respects, but again, it's easier to get in because it was very, very difficult to get booked when I started. You had to know somebody, you had to have somebody go to bat for you and think that you had something. So they putting their name on it.
Yeah, there was a lot of trust back then.
Absolutely, and everything was a handshake deal. There were no such things as contracts. Right. Bill Watts picked up the phone, called Ole Anderson, said, "Hey, I got a kid here. You might want to take a look at." That's all that need to be said. Done deal.
So back then they would move them from territory to territory, and then they would work top heels or baby faces at that point, and then they would move on to another territory before they can make it to the mainstream. Is that correct?
Yeah, and you wanted to do that. There were a lot of guys that had the opportunity to make it to the show, which would have been the WWF at the time, or NWA, which was, the old Georgia Championship Wrestling. Because once you were on that big cable show, what it was. You didn't have a second chance to make a first impression. So guys would actually hold themselves off till they got enough experience that they were comfortable in that big environment. And then when they were ready for the move, okay, let's make the phone call.
Well, one thing that I was always a fan of was tag team, and that was something that you were in a lot of. Where do we see WWE coming in the future with tag teams coming up?
Well, I had hoped to revive, there would be a revival of tag team wrestling because, in my opinion, a great tag match is damn near impossible to follow.
Right.
It's the greatest 30 to 45 minutes you'll ever see on a show when things are the way they should be. Right. Only problem with that is you're talking about teams, talking about a lot of transportation costs. You only got so many slots on a show. And if that's only one tag match for sure. In the old days, you would have as many as two, ridiculously, sometimes 3 tags, but they all had separate angles and separate issues. So I think it's a problem of having enough teams not only gel together, get along well together, complement each other, but transportation costs, as crazy as that may sound.
Well, with them going to 3 hours, do you think that would save on talent if they put some tag teams together? I mean, tag teams, you guys traveled the road. You guys lived together. You guys were a married couple, basically, in the tag team division back then. Do you think they need that now?
Wouldn't hurt. Yeah. It absolutely would not hurt. Because you do develop a bond. You become as close as family. Doesn't mean you even like the guy, but you depend on him to earn your living, and he depends on you. And that kind of bond is probably stronger than just blood, if you think about it. It's a business proposition, and I tell you what it would do. It would teach a lot of these guys to pay attention to what's going on in every aspect of the match, not just their end. This is a me scenario sometimes in this industry. It's all about me and mine. If you're in a tag situation, it's not just about you. It's about the other 3 guys as well. So it wouldn't hurt them to learn that aspect of the business as well.
I think, in my opinion, and a lot of people out there opinion too, they would like to see a manager's situation come back because you don't see very many managers out there anymore. I think this AJ angle is a really cool, twist because she's not only a wrestler, but she's also kind of like, with Punk or with Bryan or, she's out there, and it's a kind of cool little different angle. What do you think about managers now versus what used to be back then?
Oh, well, I think there's a definitive spot, for the right person, but if you're not going to be a Jim Cornette, or you're not going to be a J.J. Dillon, or you're not going to be a Bobby Heenan, if you don't bring those things to the table to just have a manager out there to have him, again, it's a waste of transportation. But AJ has kind of morphed into being the 4th person in the Kane, Daniel Bryan, Punk trilogy. And that just happened. It wasn't written in by, some writer or something. It just morphed into it. It's one of the most interesting things on our show. Right. And I think AJ, if you look at her acting skills, she sucks you in. That little 90-pound chick, that 90-pound crazy chick, like Punk likes to call her, sucked me in. Right. And I'm not easily entertained. Yeah. So I think there's a spot for him, and she's doing good.
Well, lastly, because I know you got a lot of things going on, I want to talk about the Legends figure that just came out. Now, as you might not know, or you might know, the fans had to go and vote on who they wanted in this Legends series. This is an internet exclusive, and they picked you. How does that make you feel, and what do you think about the figure?
Well, of all the things that have happened to me this year, I've been so blessed being put in the Hall of Fame and get to share that with the guys that I shared it with, the Horsemen. Thank you. That meant more than most people will ever know. And to still be in a position to affect the youth that's coming along and help those guys and address them at my Hall of Fame speech, that felt good. But this comes from what we all do. Apparently, I just found out today that this was voted on by everybody, and they had their choice of anybody in the world to have one of these made of, and mine was one of those names. And to know that you're still relevant, I'm 53 years old, been out of the business, basically the wrestling end since '97. To know that I'm somehow relevant, very humbling, and it's such an honor you wouldn't believe. And I just want to say thank you to everyone that cast a vote in my favor. Very, very honored. Thank you.
Well, thank you for all that you've done for us, and I appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you on the road.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
We'll be back with more from Comic-Con 2012 here in San Diego.